Do you really need a FetHead, Cloudlifter or any other inline preamp? Hey, Julian Kraus here, and I see so many people buying a Cloudlifter or FetHead just because they were told that it reduces their noise floor, when in their specific recording setup it might not make an audible difference at all. Don't get me wrong here, an inline preamp like a FetHead or Cloudlifter can definitely lower your noise floor and be a very useful tool, but there are still many situations where they are simply not needed. So the question is, do you need an inline preamp? Well, if you use a condenser microphone, it's a simple answer, which is no, you really don't need a FetHead or Cloudlifter. They wouldn't even work with them anyways, so if you own a condenser mic and were wondering if you would need an inline preamp for this mic, the answer is no, and you can happily end the video here and save the money. For everybody who's using a dynamic mic, you might benefit from an inline preamp, but here the answer is a little bit more difficult and it really depends on three things. First of all, it depends on how good the preamp in your recording device already is compared to a FetHead or Cloudlifter. Many people claim that an inline preamp amplifies the audio signal without introducing any additional noise. That's simply not true. A FetHead or Cloudlifter still got some amount of intrinsic noise. Granted, it is very low. So what I'm trying to say is that if the mic preamp in your recording device is as low noise as something like a FetLifter, then there's really no benefit in using an inline preamp because it does not reduce the noise floor any further. And I think many people are quick to assume that the preamps in audio recording devices are way noisier than inline preamps. But that's a very big misconception. These days the preamps in audio recording devices, even the cheaper ones, can be very low noise. I measured the equivalent input noise, that's a way to measure the intrinsic noise of a preamp, of the FetHead, and it comes in at around -130 dBu, and I also measured the EIN of the preamps in the UMC 202HD audio interface. Those come in at -129.1 dBu. As you can see, the difference in noise is only about 1 decibel, which is usually inaudible in practice. This means that the preamps in the 202HD are already so low noise that adding an inline preamp will only result in a negligible change in noise. So in this case it wouldn't make much sense to buy a FetHead because the preamps in this interface are already ultra low noise. And to show you that this is true, here is the noise of the UMC 202HD with and without the FetHead. Have a listen. Now let's have a look at a scenario where an inline preamp might make sense. Here I do have a Zoom H5. The reason I chose this audio recorder is because of its preamps. The H5's preamps are not completely bad, but they are definitely much higher noise than the Behringer UMC 202HD. The EIN of the preamps in the H5 is around -120.5 dBu, compared to the -130 dBu of the FetHead. The H5's preamps have nearly 10 decibels more noise. I shortly have to mention that when you connect an inline preamp with a recording device, it essentially replaces the noise performance of the built-in preamps of this recording device. This means that if you use a FetHead with the Zoom H5, you will have an EIN of -130 dBu instead of the -120.5 dBu. So like I said, using a FetHead in conjunction with a Zoom H5 can lower the preamp noise by nearly 10 decibels. That's a huge difference. Have a listen for yourself. Now you could see the two extremes. The UMC 202HD was representing an audio device with very low noise preamps, where an additional inline preamp does not make much sense. And the H5 was representing an audio device with higher noise preamps, where the use of a FetHead or Cloudlifter can result in a considerable reduction in noise. In practice, there are a ton of audio recording devices and all of them have different preamp noise performances. But generally speaking, the closer the noise performance of the built-in preamp is to the inline preamp, the less you benefit from the inline preamp. Okay, I think this all makes sense, but there are two more things to look at to figure out whether you need an inline preamp or not. The next thing that can make a big difference in the noise floor of your recording is the microphone you use. Here I do have two microphones, namely the Shure SM7B and the Behringer XM8500. Both mics are going directly into my Zoom H5 and I'm recording them simultaneously. As you can see, for the Behringer I had to set the gain to around 5.5 to record the audio with a proper level, and for the Shure SM7B I had to turn the gain to around level 7. The reason for this is the difference in sensitivity between the two mics. The Shure SM7B has an incredibly low sensitivity of -59 dBV at 1 Pascal, and the Behringer XM8500 has a sensitivity of supposedly -50 dBV at 1 Pascal. This means that when you record the exact same audio signal with the SM7B and the XM8500, the electrical signal coming out of the XM8500 will be about 9 decibels higher in amplitude than the signal out of the SM7B. This way you do not have to use as much amplification with the XM8500 as you have to with the SM7B, and thus can get a lower noise floor. Now I will be quiet for a second to let you listen to the noise floor with each microphone. You could clearly hear the noise with the Shure SM7B, and you could hardly hear any noise with the XM8500. In this situation you would definitely want to use a FetHead with the H5 to lower the noise floor when recording with the SM7B. But for the XM8500, even though it is recorded with the arguably noisy preamps of the H5, the recording is still fine and there is no need for an inline preamp. This goes to show that the microphone plays a big role in whether you need an inline preamp or not. The higher the sensitivity of the mic, the less likely it will be that you encounter preamp noise in your recordings. There is still one more point to consider when deciding on buying a Cloudhead or FetLifter, and that's the amplitude of the sound you are recording. When you're whispering or you're yelling into the microphone, this will produce very different output levels. When you yell into the mic, the signal is going to be much stronger, less amplification is needed, and the noise floor is going to be very low. If you are whispering, the sound pressure level of your voice is much lower in comparison, and thus you have to turn up the gain, which can lead to an audible noise floor. There is a way to make the audio signal the mic picks up stronger without you having to yell all the time, and that's by simply moving closer to the microphone. When you place the mic closer to the sound source, the sound pressure level at the mic capsule will increase, and that's what matters. The mic does not care if you create a higher SPL by screaming or getting the mic physically closer. Raising the sound pressure or reducing the distance between the mic and the sound source will both lead to an increased signal output. Again, you need less gain, and it is going to be less likely that you can hear preamp noise in the first place, reducing the need for an inline preamp. So do you need a Cloudfed lifter head? Well, I did make a handy flowchart for you to follow and find out. It starts with the question, does your recording device have ultra low noise preamps? An EIN of -129 dBu or below I would consider ultra low noise. If that's the case, your preamps in the recording device are already good enough and there is going to be hardly any reduction in noise when using an additional inline preamp. In that case, you probably don't need a FetHead or Cloudlifter. Let's say your preamps are not ultra low noise. So the next question is, do you record loud stuff? Loud would be things like a close-up drums or an interview with a jet engine. If that's the case, you probably don't need a FetHead or Cloudlifter. Okay, let's say you record lower level audio things like dialogue. Then you would jump into the last question. Do you use a microphone with a high sensitivity? Dynamic mics with about -50 dBV or 3 mV at 1 Pascal I consider to be high sensitivity. So if you use something like a Behringer XM8500, then you already guessed it, you probably don't need a FetHead or Cloudlifter. On the other hand, if you use something like a Shure SM7B with its notoriously low sensitivity of -59 dBV or about 1 mV at 1 Pascal, then it's pretty likely that you need a FetHead or Cloudlifter. Of course, there are an endless combinations of different recording devices, mics and recording situations out there, and this flowchart cannot accommodate every single situation, but it can give you a pretty good idea if an inline preamp might be useful or not. One thing is for sure though, if nobody hears any noise in your recordings, You probably don't need okay, I think you know it by now. I hope you understand that the answer to the question whether you need an inline preamp or not is not a simple yes or no answer. Like with many things in life, it depends. I hope you liked this video. If so, leave me a like and feel free to subscribe to my channel. I will see you all in the next one.